It's going to work. I totally recommend going out to do this. I've been hoping that some country, in fact, does exactly this. I thought China or India or Brazil would be the first country to have the first mover advantage. And in this case, first mover advantage is going to be huge, because once you get into that gold standard, people are looking around at fiat currencies and they're like, where can I get an actual resource-based currency? Oh, the Zimbabwe dollar? I'm in. And this is going to bring huge amounts of capital into Zimbabwe, and they'll make them an international global player.
Well, okay, and then some could look at Zimbabwe and think, okay, they've had a hyperinflationary collapse, they're run by maniacs, but then look at who else holds the U.S. dollar. Who's the biggest bond fund trader in the world, Max Kaiser?
PIMCO!
Well, they're in this next headline. Bullish on cognac, yogurt, and gold. So Fortune magazine interviewed PIMCO's equities portfolio manager, Anne Goodfein, and she said, quote, the largest position in the fund is gold, which we think is a very good form of protection against what could go wrong. We were encouraged by the fact that a lot of central banks, especially in Asia, are big buyers. We think that's an underlying trend that's very favorable for gold.
That's right. Well, Bill Gross's main fund over there at PIMCO, due to the way that that fund is set up, the charter that created that fund, he's not allowed actually to own precious metals. But he's a believer in inflation, if not hyperinflation, so you would naturally think he'd be a buyer of gold. So here's one of his satellite funds actually buying gold. So now the circle has been complete. PIMCO is pimping gold, as he should be in this environment where the bond market will get creamed.
Well, there have also, as gold and silver have corrected over the last 2 or 3 weeks, as they've had big declines, silver up to 30%, there have been all sorts of shouting and screaming, especially in the BBC, saying, it was a bubble, it's burst, it's popped. So what do these sort of people, who do you trust? For example, the largest bond fund trader in the world or the BBC?
I trust the actual people who are dealing with money day to day, not the lackeys at the BBC who are an extension of the corrupt government. And after the Hutton affair, of course, the BBC lost all objectivity, and they're in the pocket of those nasty number 10 Downing Street apparatchik. Well,
and this goes on to the other thing. So gold, as I said, fell back. Here's the headline. Gold coin sales reaching one-year high signal no end to rally in history. So this is from Bloomberg, another big financial news service. The U.S. Mint sold 85,000 ounces of American Eagle coins since May 1st, as the Standard & Poor's GSCI index of 24 raw materials fell 9.9%. The last time sales reached that level, bullion rose 21% in the next year.
Freedom is on sale. As I explained on this show many times, Stacey Herbert, in particular with the price of silver, when it got up to the price of J.P. Morgan's stock price, that there would be a huge turbulence because J.P. Morgan was going to defend that price because they've used their own stock to collateralize against naked silver short sales. Just like Enron used its own stock to try to keep the wolves at the door and then eventually collapse to zero, J.P. Morgan stock will collapse to zero at some point. So when it got to that price of J.P. Morgan stock in the mid-40s, then you had J.P. Morgan pull in a lot of favors with the Fed and the Treasury and the global banking system and the various sisters of deceit led by Diamond and Tim Geithner. And they, stage an attack on silver as they've done before. But they can only attack it so much because what they've done is they've radicalized more silver buyers. The Silver Liberation Army has been radicalized by more of these attacks. And so you've got a much wider base developing, which will translate into a much higher amplitude, and the eventual target of $500 I'm sticking to.
It's not just the U.S. Mint that sold a record amount. Rand Refinery, which sells the Krugerrands, which mints Krugerrands, they also had record month. Also, UBS had a record month in selling gold. So, but this is that big theme that we've said to focus on for 2011. That's the collapse of the U.S. empire, which is the collapse of the dollar. And you'll see that there's no getting around it. And final headline, Max, this shows you without any doubt, just like this PIMCO story, that the dollar is ready to collapse and gold, therefore, will be the new currency. J.P. Morgan's hunt for Afghan gold.
Huh? So, what? J.P. Morgan, what? Tell me more.
A team of bankers starts to tap the country's vast mineral riches with help from the Pentagon. So JP Morgan Capital Markets are in Afghanistan, backed by the Pentagon, and they believe that Afghanistan represents a gigantic, untapped opportunity, one of the last great natural resource frontiers, and they reckon it has hundreds of billions of dollars worth of gold, and they're in there to acquire that.
Yeah, they don't want to pay $35 an ounce for silver or $1,500 an ounce for gold. They want to pay nothing. They want it free. They want to have the U.S. taxpayer finance the Pentagon to go into Afghanistan, murder a bunch of people, destroy the civilization, kill the culture, and steal all the resources. That was the strategy in Iraq with oil. That's the strategy of the Pentagon / JP Morgan / Goldman Sachs around the world. These two have fused together. Now, how somebody can argue that this isn't some, bastardization of fascism, explain to me how this isn't fascism when you've got the banks and the Pentagon fused together and the Pentagon bombs the country and the bank steals all the precious metals? How is that a sustainable foreign policy, and how is that not going to lead to social unrest and all kind? Huh?
Max,
What?
Listen,
Talk to me.
Listen, this goes in with the collapse of the dollar and the collapse of the empire, the fact that the U.S. is the empire. The article states this wealth, all these natural resources in Afghanistan, has lain there mainly undisturbed for thousands of years as armies of Persians, Greeks, Mongols, Britons, Russians, and now Americans tramped above. Invaders have dreamed of exploiting it since the time of Alexander the Great, but no one has yet succeeded on a large scale, and I reckon the U.S. won't succeed either.
Yeah, that's where the empires go to die. Hey, before we go, let me do my impression of Dominic Strauss-Kahn when he arrives for his first night in a prison cell surrounded by a bunch of hardened criminals. Oops! Well, buddy, got to learn some new tricks. All right, that's going to do it. Stacey Herbert, thanks so much.
Thank you, Max.
When we come back, much more coming your way, so don't go away.